So Russia is in Syria, and the Donald seriously has no problem with it. To hear Trump tell it, don't be mad at Vlad, be glad for Vlad.
If you look at Syria, Russia wants to get rid of ISIS. We want to get rid of ISIS. Maybe let Russia do it. Let them get rid of ISIS. What the hell do we care?
Well, give the billionaire this much. We save billions in Syria letting Russia whack ISIS. That is, if it is ISIS that the Russians are whacking. Let's just say some of my colleagues have their doubts. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Kavita, Ben Stein, and Charles Payne, and Dagan McDowell, along with Adam Lashinsky and Charlie Gasparino. I think it's the first time in weeks we've got the original maestros all
The gang's
back.
all here.
The gang is all here. All right, Charles. Now, you've spoken to Trump on this and other subjects. Does he really believe that?
Absolutely. I got to tell you, initially, obviously, when those first airstrikes came and it was the rebels that we backed, a lot of people said, oh, man, Trump's already got egg on his face. But over the last few hours, a lot of folks have come around to saying, first of all, who are these rebels? Just because they're opposition to Assad doesn't mean that they're our friends. Secondly, let them all blow each other up. I mean, you know, we have to make the situation worse in a lot of instances, if we're honest about this. Would ISIS exist if Hussein was still there? What's happened in Libya, would that be worse or better if Gaddafi was still there? It's really tough to try to force democracy in places where they never had it.
But he's doubling down on it, still supports it. All right, what do you make of that, Caspar?
I think it's incredibly naive to think that Vladimir Putin would do anything in the U.S. best interest. And I think this is one of the problems with Donald's candidacy. He refuses to read up on certain topics. He has some very good political instincts, obviously, on certain key issues, particularly core issues with Republican voters. But this is stupid. I mean, Vladimir Putin is going to do what's in the best interest of Russia.
So you don't believe he's going after ISIS?
No, he's probably, we know what he's doing, I believe? I believe he's creating chaos to make the world a less stable place.
Wait a minute, let me write that down. You think he's creating...
Can you get a new joke?
I thought you were going to say he's creating chaos and rising.
Could you get a new joke?
Come on, really? I mean, there's no way. I mean, he's doing more than that.
I mean, you're saying like he's Spectra or something like that. I mean, maybe if he's going to hike the price of oil...
What are you saying? What is he doing?
Dagan, what do you make of it? That he doesn't appreciate the gravity of this, or he does?
I don't think he does, because you can't separate ISIS in Syria and ISIS in Iraq, which he seems to want to do, while Vladimir Putin is building even more power, doing a deal with Iraq on intelligence. So you're just going to step back and let terror take over in the Middle East. Let me finish before you interrupt me. I can smack you on the other coast.
Of course.
To say let everybody kill each other, let Putin do what he wants to, is essentially President Obama's policy.
All right, Adam?
Here's my objection to what you're saying, Dagan. It is far too intelligent. You are being far too analytical and insightful here about a complicated situation, which Charlie has already 100% accurately identified. Donald Trump could care less about this.
And he doesn't want to read up on it.
He has very good political instincts. He's just saying words that he thinks will play well, and they will play well.
But what Trump is saying, if I understand what Trump is saying, is he's saying, well, let him go at it and fight these guys. But isn't that, Ben Stein, the assumption that he's going after ISIS and not the guys we're trying to get to overthrow Assad? In other words, or is he doesn't mind the particulars? Let it look like they're going after the bad guys so we don't have to about it.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's long been considered a cardinal point of U.S. policy to have important influence in the Middle East. Mr. Putin is trying to dispute that and trying to claim interest himself. Clearly, it's unequivocal that he is going after the democratic anti-Assad forces and not going after Assad. He is a troublemaker everywhere he goes. But Ash Carter, a very smart Secretary of Defense, an excellent appointment by President Obama, said, okay, fine, if Putin wants to take on everybody who hates Assad in Syria, let him do it. He's going to get into a lot of trouble. And the Russians have made serious mistakes in dealing with Muslim countries. We know that from Afghanistan. I suspect this is another mistake for them, but I don't think that Mr. Trump understands it.
Yeah, but that's Ash Carter saying that, somebody who's given some thought to this. I am telling you, Donald has given 30 seconds of thought to this subject. He's spoken with probably nobody. He's spoken with nobody, and for us to hang policy, the policy debates on some guy that just
well, Charles, he is the front runner right now among Republicans, and you're right. That might be very short-lived, but what I'm saying is that a reckless strategy?
There are people out there who've given a gazillion years worth of thought to this, and they don't have the solution. What is the solution?
That's true.
The debate over boots on the ground. You know, who's the lesser of the evils out there? I don't know that really matters at this point, because we've got a feckless policy that's left a void, and that's why Russia was able to move in the first place.
But isn't he also saying to money issues, Dagan? Isn't he also saying, why should we squander billions in this region to see how it works out?
And lives and everything.
And lives, and let the Russians do it.
But there are a lot of things you can do in Syria. No-fly zones, for example, something that other candidates like Marco Rubio are talking about.
But how does that hurt ISIS, though?
Let me finish my thought. And also increase the airstrikes in the region. So I don't think...
You can smack him. He's right there, Dagan.
Listen, our policy... Charles is bigger than you are.
Ooh.
And... Our policy has been one, to paraphrase the Wall Street Journal, one of retreat that created a vacuum, and that's what it sounds like Donald Trump is doubling down.
Do you think, Gaspo, it hurts him politically saying what he said? Does it make him look naive, or do people even bounce him? He's been bulletproof in the...
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, you know, I will just say this, though, but it should, and here's why. Because if you read more about what he says, you know, I can work with Putin. I can, you know, Putin would fear me. I mean, I don't think he's used those exact words, but that's the context of what he's saying, which is all nonsense. I mean, Putin doesn't fear Donald Trump. He doesn't fear anybody. It's also nonsense that Donald's never going to be able to work with him. I mean, you're working with him is like you might as well work with Don Corleone. I mean, it's not going to happen, you know.
Neil, I want to add to something Charles said. Charles is absolutely right. I mean, this subject has frustrated very serious, intelligent people who know a lot about the Middle East. But I would rather they continue to address this, not somebody who's just...
I guess the thing, though, Adam, is when we say address it, we mean talk about it. We mean debate it. Lives are being lost every single day.
Of course.
I mean,
but I have no confidence in his ability to address the policy, Charles.
With the greatest possible respect to Charles, this guy is a madman, sadistic, poison gas-using killer of civilians.
You're talking about Putin now, right?
Any sense, both. Why would we in any sense want to throw in our lot with a horrible guy like Assad?
So are you saying ISIS is better, Ben?
That's like a lie. That's like a lying with... No, I'm saying they're both horrible. You're quite right. It's a good point. They're both horrible, but Assad, we know, is a horrible, awful person. Why don't we go with the democratic force, if there are any, in Syria, to try to defeat Assad and ISIS?
But I think there's a shrewd end game to what Trump is doing. You can help me with this, guys. It's this. He knows Americans are war-weary and fatigued. They don't necessarily support the Obama position, but they also feel, look, we don't want to get knee-deep in this region of the world.
Right.
And here's a guy who speaks for our frustration with this. And if the Russians are going to deal with ISIS, even though we could argue they're not dealing with ISIS, we'll support that. That actually he is going to come out of this. That is Trump. Looking pretty good.
Listen, you're right. I mean, there's a triangulation going on here with Donald, and that's why I respect his political skills. But you do have to give this more than 30 seconds worth of thought, and I think.
And I will also add to this.
This is a very difficult situation.
I will also add this, and that's why I did ask him. I said, listen, how can you say you're going to build the world's the most important, the biggest military in the world, have the biggest stick, and not use it?
And what did he say?
You know, it's interesting. He thinks that he's got something special. He thinks he's got something special, like Michael Jordan had in basketball. Yeah, and that
like
somehow Putin, with the big military and Putin, that he would be able to persuade people in a way that others can't or haven't been able.
You know what American people know? Two things. Don't trust anybody who's ex-KGB. Don't trust anybody associated with the former Soviet Union. And two, our diminished influence and less influence in the Middle East will bring a bigger terror threat onto our shores. And Trump's policy...
Do you think Americans are okay
does all of that?
There now,
We're not talking about troops. I said talk about airstrikes and creating no-fly zones, at least initially. We haven't done it. How do we know?
We do our sorties every day.
You give it too much.
More sorties.
You give it too much credence calling Trump's policy. Like I said, it's a thought that passed through his head.
All right.
Totally agree. Meanwhile, I'm going to put Dagan as a maybe on Trump.